everybody. Super excited today for this guest. This has been such a hot topic, and we've got the expert in the room today. Ron Seigneur is first and foremost. I'm going to get all the letters behind your name: CPA, ABV, ASA, CVA. In a minute, I'll let you explain any of those letters you want. But really excited to have you. You're founding partner of Senior Gustafson out of Denver, Colorado. You have many decades of experience for that firm and just in accounting in general. We've gotten to know each other through the AICPA Cannabis Conference, and I've had a great time doing that and looking up to you as well as even a mentor in what you're doing, and just how you're still just at it, having fun as well. You're also the author of more than 100 articles. You're an adjunct professor at University of Denver, Sturm College of Law, and Daniels College of Business. And then even more importantly, the Cannabis Industry Accounting and Appraisal Guide. That was published 2018, coming out again, I believe, early 2023. And we will definitely be getting a copy, along with, I'm sure, many people in our program will be grabbing that as well. So why don't you jump in and give a little more color to your long history and experience in the CPA world.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate that introduction, and it's wonderful to be with you today for part of your series. Yeah, CPA, I've got a bunch of valuation credentials after my name that is duck soup to anybody other than the people that have the credentials. Everybody knows the CPA kind of is the gold standard, but they also kind of put me in a box, like, you know, as a tax practitioner. And I did 25 tax seasons. We have a firm here in Lakewood, which is a western suburb of Denver, where we do about 1,000 individual tax returns and about 400 business tax returns annually. I have two other partners there that are, one's exclusively tax and one's kind of half tax, half valuation litigation services like me. I started out my career in Arthur Andersen, and just to go back a little further, because it's, I think, tangentially relevant. I grew up in rural Michigan, baling hay, milking cows, you know, in a small one high school town. My parents were in the restaurant business and had a restaurant equipment company. They had what were big boy restaurants in Michigan, and I thought I was going to go in the family business, so I went off to Michigan State, got a degree in hotel restaurant management. And just as I was graduating from college, my dad and my uncle were fighting over the business, so I decided to go off and do something else. And I worked in airline catering for a couple of years, which was really cool, for a company called Sky Chefs that was owned by American Airlines. And I was the night services food supervisor in the flight kitchen in Phoenix at Sky Harbor Airport. And back then, you'd get a hot meal if you were flying from like Denver to, you know, to Phoenix. Yeah. Today, you get, you know, a package of peanuts. But I supervised, and I'm like 23 years old out of college.
Yeah.
I'm supervising 60 AFL-CIO union employees, a third of which didn't speak English, and I didn't speak Spanish. And I was challenged. It was a really heavy management production facility and taught me a lot of things. But then I went back to grad school, decided I want to be in hospitality. One of my claims to fame, though, I get to fit this in, is we catered executive jets when I was at the flight kitchen, and I got to cater a lot of famous people, including I made Elvis Presley a peanut butter and banana sandwich. And I was the one that took the catering out to the plane. So I actually got to shake Elvis's hand, you know, and I'm sure I had kind of a white suit on and a hard hat. And I'm sure he's like, who the hell is this guy? How did he get on my plane? But I always say, you know, my claim to fame is I made Elvis a peanut butter and banana sandwich. So
that's a awesome story. And even I was going to have to tell you, don't leave out a little bit of the story just about how you ended up in Denver and met your longtime wife as well, because that's you told me that before, and it's a great story.
Yeah, well, that fits right in this slot. So thanks for the setup, Andrew. But so when I decided to go back to grad school, I got accepted to the University of Michigan. I'm a Spartan undergrad in a Michigan MBA, so I'm a Wolverine and a Spartan, and go Wolverines in the playoffs. So, but I was traveling from Phoenix back to Ann Arbor to start grad school. Got in a horrific car accident up in what's called the Eisenhower Tunnel, which is right at the Continental Divide where you go into Summit County. I broke both my femurs. I had 26 fractures in one and 3 in the other. Almost died, cut out of the car by the volunteer fire department from a little town called Georgetown, and flown down to a hospital here by Flight for Life, which is a pretty famous air rescue helicopter regimen from this hospital, St. Anthony's. And I ended up spending 17 weeks at St. Anthony's convalescing with my 2 broken legs. And I met my wife, who was an orthopedic nurse there, and that we've now been married 42 years. So
it shows. I love that story because it just, there are these seemingly little things, and sometimes a bad thing. It's like, oh, it's a bad thing, but it led to a huge piece of your life.
It had one other good outcome too that I always like to. So I don't remember the accident at all. I was a passenger in the front seat without a seatbelt, and if I would have worn a seatbelt back, this was 1978. If I would have been wearing a seatbelt, I probably possibly would have walked away without a scratch. But the chief of the Georgetown Fire Department noticed my last name, which is a little bit unique, and he came down to see me at the hospital I was in a week later. And it turns out that he and my dad were in Normandy in World War II together.
Wow.
This was 1978, and they hadn't seen each other since 1945. Wow. So they reunited as Army buddies over my accident. So not only did I meet my wife, but my dad kind of reunited with somebody that was in a nasty part of World War II with. So that's kind of cool.
That's awesome.
So went back to grad school, had a long distance relationship with my then nurse girlfriend. And when I graduated from U of M, I interviewed for jobs in Denver, came out and went to work for Arthur Andersen. And I left there, went to work for a oil and gas company for a couple of years. Then I went to work for a law firm. I was at the law firm for about 7 years as their chief operating officer. It was about a 50 attorney law firm. So taught me a lot about law firms and law and managing professional services firms. And that's kind of a specialty niche that I do a lot of retreat facilitation, legal administrative recruiting, compensation systems, startups and breakups. So I've got kind of law firms is kind of an area of emphasis for me. And I've noticed through the years, CPAs and lawyers and practitioners, like doctors are all, they're an MD, but then they're board certified as a pediatrician or a podiatrist or whatever, where it's hard to be a generalist anymore. I mean, your focus is, the cannabis industry and people that, know that and know the unique, and I'm sure we're going to get there, but, so we have that focus, which we'll talk about. So I have a focus with law firms. My partner, Paul Gustafson, has about 80 animal hospitals and veterinarians that he works with. That's kind of a niche that he's developed, doing some valuation, but a lot of helping them. There's a big roll-up going on in the veterinary world, kind of like dental practices. So he's been very active in that niche, which is really interesting, especially with my pets and the amount of money we spend on our four-legged animals. So it's been good to get to where I'm at. I turned 70 in April. I'm just blessed to have the career I've had. I've had my own firm since 1988. When I left the law firm that I was managing, and started out working on my own out of my basement, grew the firm, and it's evolved. We now have about 15 people. Probably about 2/3 of our practice is traditional. When you think of a CPA firm, we do some compilation and review. We used to do some audit work, but we kind of got away from that because of the peer review burden. But we do a lot of tax work, a lot of sophisticated tax work. And then we have what I do is I call it the BVFLS, Business Valuation Forensic Litigation Services. We do a lot of financial forensics. We do a lot of commercial damages. And we're having fun with it because it's nice. We get to learn a lot about little sub industries as we kind of bump around into auto dealerships or, Mexican restaurants or.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's cool. You talk about that sub niching, and I think it's a big concept now. So and yeah, we'll talk about cannabis. So if you're just a random generalist, could be a bookkeeper, CPA, whatever, and you go into the cannabis niche, all of a sudden you can focus on that market for the nationwide. But then even within, there's other niching within. If you're a CPA, you can become a valuation expert. One kind of side topic on that, you mentioned litigation. I think a lot of people think about, oh, what's this? Because we hear about what's my dispensary worth? What's my farm worth? What's the value? And a lot of times people think, oh, you do a valuation because you're selling the business, but it may be you're raising capital, or you're doing a stock option plan, or even more. And I always caution owners and investors and even CPAs, and you probably know the statistics more than I do. I know divorce in America is about 50%. So if you stay married, you're doing well. But I think the partnership failure rate is something like 70 or 80%. And so there's just a massive need. And it's the same in the cannabis world. People say, yeah, let's go together and form a dispensary. And 3 years later, everybody's suing each other to get out. And so it's a big piece of the valuation world. So it's both, so it will be a part of the cannabis niche. You'll have all kinds of valuations. Yeah, someone wants to sell the company, or someone's just suing someone else to get out of the business. And I'm sure you see both sides of that as well.
Oh, absolutely. And it's litigation in the cannabis sector is exploding. And I think a lot of it's driven by the economics right now, that there's, a lot of people rushed into cannabis, as that they want, it's kind of sexy. I want to be in the cannabis business. And, it's kind of like, not quite as crazy as investing in crypto. And we see how that's turning out. But it's like people thought they were going to make a killing in cannabis, and things look like they were just ramping up. And then all of a sudden along comes, a lot of things, the stalled nature of Washington we can talk about. The fact that there's an oversupply of product in many markets. Colorado's somewhat in balance, but we've been doing some stuff in Michigan and Oregon, and it's just, it's awful out there. It's just,
Well, that's a great point. I wanted to cut you off a little bit on the valuation side. That's unique to this cannabis market. We're not a national market because there's state lines drawn, and until that goes away. I saw a business model yesterday, actually, from Massachusetts, and they were forecasting value of a cultivator, $2,600 a pound, and I was like, oh, that can't be right. That's way too high. And I Googled it, and they're actually they're getting those prices in Massachusetts. And I was like, holy crap. And there's just wide fluctuations in pricing in different markets, which makes value. You can't say what's the value of a dispensary in Oklahoma versus say, Massachusetts. It's going to be a lot different.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what makes it so fascinating. So I've been doing valuation for almost 40 years. I was doing it part-time for many years when I also had an active tax practice, but, we've valued everything from feedlots to auto dealerships to, just bizarre industries. I have a little list of like my top 10 most interesting engagements, but just when I thought I'd seen all of it, along comes, marijuana and the unique nuances, and one that you just alluded to is, it's like 50, encapsulated businesses because of the restriction of interstate commerce, notwithstanding that it's happening. I was just reading an article that I have right here from I think yesterday's Wall Street Journal. Oklahoma tackles a growing black market marijuana industry. The state has issued active licenses for about 7,000 growers and roughly 2,600 dispensaries in a state that only has medical marijuana and 4 million people. So if you figure that 10% of, so 400,000, might be consuming medical marijuana, and you've got 2,600 dispensaries, it's like something's not right there. So it's talking about, that all the stuff that everybody's rushed to Oklahoma to grow is not necessarily staying in Oklahoma. And I think that's when you hear somebody's getting 2,600 a pound, I mean, to me, what that just like raises the flag, like, hey, illicit market, come here because you
Yeah,
you can make a
yeah.
killing.
It's a great point, and it's like this chicken and egg deal. I think we're going through it in Oregon. So on the one, so those are my two home states, and it's kind of interesting. Oregon and Oklahoma. I was born and raised in Oklahoma, red state, Oregon, a blue state, but they both kind of went free market. There's too many cannabis companies in both. But you look at the problem, like in Oregon, for example. Okay, you got a farmer. Well, so for example, our governor just expunged, I don't know, 45,000 cannabis people, let them out of jail. But now we have this issue with, okay, I'm a real grower, I'm legal, I'm trying to follow the rules, we're only getting whatever 1,000 a pound here, and like you said, but my next door neighbor is an illegal grower and they're making a killing, and so it's not fair. And so Oregon's like, same deal. Oh, we're going to crack down on these people. I was like, well, you just let all these other people out of jail. What are you going to crack down and arrest them and then let them out of jail? It's a hard issue to solve. Over
It sure
time.
is. It sure is. I mean, the classic Humboldt Triangle, and where they've been growing really quality stuff for 50 years, and they put the blinders on because it's their economy, and they can't shut it down because it's everything to many of the people up there. So they let them blindly continue to produce a lot of quality stuff that they make a few busts here and there, and it's a very high profile when they do. But there's as the statistics show, the illicit market is growing as fast as the state legal regulated market is growing. I saw some statistics. I have a slide in the presentation I do that projects that the illicit market will be a $60 billion market in a couple of years, where the combined state rec and medical will be 40 billion. So, as more states come in, there's still illicit stuff that will continue to happen.
And my personal opinion of that too is, I think, so I already think, and I've seen different numbers thrown. I've seen numbers that California illegal market's 90 billion already. That the numbers are kind of wild, but I think over a multi-decade approach, I think one thing is pushing this whole movement is we're aging, the baby boomers, lots and lots of kind of older people like me, almost 60, and my parents starting to get medicines. My mom doesn't want to buy illegal pot. She wants to know that it's tested at the lab. And so I think over a 10 to 20 year period, that'll be kind of like alcohol. You could probably still buy a bootleg bottle of gin, but you'd probably rather trust your source. And so I think over a long, long period of time, we'll solve these issues like interstate commerce, and markets will be more mature. And at the end of the day, the medicine is pushing this whole deal. And then just us wanting to trust what the heck we're buying. Even like the CBD market, you can look at, who knows what's in half those products right now. Well, why don't we
I co-chair a thing called the Cannabis Law Symposium for the Colorado Bar every year. It's coming up this February. And we have always had the U.S. Attorney for Colorado come in as our ending keynote. And a couple of years ago, Jason Dunn, who was the U.S. Attorney at that point, came in and he said, I'm the chief federal law enforcement officer for the state of Colorado, and here I am speaking at a cannabis conference on how to help people, be involved in an illegal activity. Because he said, he said, don't shoot the messenger, but I'm with the feds, I'm with the Department of Justice. So he says it's hard for me to come in here and condone what you're doing, because technically it's still illegal. But he said, personally, and he's very careful to say, this is me speaking, not the position of the Department of Justice. But he said, the demand's not going away. People are going to be consuming cannabis. It's growing. He said, so if the demand's going to be there, we ought to test it, tax it, and regulate it. And we ought to get rid of the illicit market, which is a good thing for the cannabis industry if they ever get serious about it. To drive away these illicit traffickers. And at some point, the bigger discussion is we're going to have interstate commerce, and it's going to be descheduled or rescheduled, and that
Yeah.
could happen legislatively, or it could happen through the courts. There's some things perking around in the federal courts that could eventually get to the Supreme Court. And Justice Thomas, a year ago said, if the legislative branch doesn't fix this, we may need to take up a case in the court. So like telegraphing, like, you guys better deal with this, because otherwise we'll make a ruling at the Supreme Court level, and then you'll be stuck with it.
We'll see. Now that is a great segue. So I'm gonna bounce around a little bit. I'm gonna pass on your lifetime service. We're gonna get to that later. Let's just jump into the valuation, because I want to, and then we'll get into, because I want to talk about that topic later in the podcast, but on the valuation side, because this is so interesting to me. So you are definitely, in my opinion, the absolute leader in the industry. Your valuation talk at the AICPA Cannabis Conference last year was standing room only. You had an amazing set of slides, and it's a topic. So in my community, Dope CFO, there's 500 accountants around the U.S. where we're interacting daily, and the topic of valuation comes up endlessly. And it's always see this. What's a dispensary worth in Oklahoma? And then someone else will say, oh, 3 million. And I was like, what, wait a minute, slow down. It's not that easy. So let's talk about valuations, and then also how you that kind of reinvigorated your career. You had mentioned to me you had even thought about retiring. You got back into this space. You've got this book on it, but talk about kind of the valuation in this industry, the difficulties, and then even say 280E, say it descheduled tomorrow. What would that do to valuations? I've heard investment bankers say, oh, that's an instant 30% pop to every company in the US.
Yeah. Excellent. And so I'm going to take these, and first I'm going to talk about just valuation fundamentals, just a little kind of 101, kind of just some brief fundamental concepts. And then I'd like to talk about how I got into doing cannabis valuation. And then we'll talk about some of the amazing nuances that I think kind of incorporate kind of what you just kind of outlined there. Yeah, valuation is of a closely held business, or intellectual property too, because we do a lot of like license rights stuff. There's three fundamental approaches to value: the asset approach, the market approach, and the income approach. And within each of those approaches, there are different methodologies that are prescribed in textbooks and classes on how you apply a capitalized earnings method under the income approach, or a multiple of EBITDA under the market approach. Or, if we're valuing a commercial shopping center for an estate, which we are right now, we have the real estate appraised by competent real estate appraisers. We will look at the balance sheet. We adjust the balance sheet to market values of the assets, deduct the liabilities, and what's left over is the value of equity. So that one's pretty easy, but it's limited application for startup businesses, operating professional practices. So typically it's some combination of a market approach and an income approach. We love the market approach. Market is where we can find market transactions that are sufficiently similar to our target to be able to use that market data to value our target. We value dental practices, and that's the best example. There's hundreds of transactions that have been captured on dental practices that have been bought and sold. And you can take, last time I looked, I think there were like 700 transactions in a database called Deal Stats that we subscribe to. And we can look at a dental practice, unless it had something really peculiar, like it's in Beverly Hills or it's doing kids orthodontia, it's going to sell for 0.6 to 0.8 times trailing 12 months collected revenues, period. And I can dial it in with a market multiple.
Yeah.
So I love it. An auto dealership, there's certain metrics that they sell for, brand and everything kind of move the multiples around a little bit more than a dental practice. But when you get to cannabis, everybody's going, hey, Ron, they call and go, what's the EBITDA multiple for a dispensary? the first thing I have to say is where, because it's
Yeah.
such a huge difference. Are you in Oklahoma City or are you in Baltimore, Maryland? Huge difference just because of the number of licenses and kind of the market and kind of all that goes into it. But the market data just is it relatively doesn't exist for cannabis. It's so new. It's got so many nuances. The data points that we do collect are jurisdictionally specific. We've got a bunch of transactions for grows and dispensaries in Colorado along the Front Range here that have been bought and sold. And we actually have a fair amount from Oregon because we've done some work and some litigation work out there. So we've found a lot of transactions. The MSOs, multi-state operators, acquiring dispensaries, and if they're public, they have to disclose what they paid to acquire in their 10Ks and 10Qs, so we can find market data and those types of things. But still, it's time specific and jurisdictionally specific. But with some of the markets that have been around a little longer, you can find some market data. And the reason I go through that because it's a great segue, because most of what we do in cannabis uses an income approach to value. We're looking at cash flows. We use present value concepts, forward-looking projections, work with management to say, project out your dispensary or your cultivation facility or your processing lab. We're going to deduct expenses. We're going to tax affect those earnings, and we're going to present value it at an effective risk-adjusted rate. Now the devil's in the details. Lots of risk because of all the things that we've been talking about. A startup industry, things change rapidly. You might say, "Oh my God, I've got a license to operate a rec dispensary in Las Vegas," and there's very few of them given the market size and a unique locale, because there's 42 million tourists that come to town, in a normal year. So if you have one of those rec licenses, it's like, wow, we just hit the lottery. Well, then the state comes around and says, this is looking pretty good, but we're going to double the amount of licenses. I got very involved in that litigation when they went from 34 licenses to 70 rec licenses throughout the state, of which most were in Clark County, where Vegas is. And just, overnight, twice as many competitors, so what's that do to value? Obviously it depresses it. It creates lots of nice work for us.
Yeah, and you're just highlighting that it's going all over, and you have to build that database almost market by market, because like you said, in Oklahoma, again, when I didn't go home this Christmas, I went home a year ago to my parents, and on kind of one busy street in a mile, there was 5 dispensaries lined up, and it's just like, this isn't sustainable. It'd be like having 5 Subways next to each, or 5 McDonald's next door to each other. That doesn't make sense.
Oklahoma's I don't even know enough to be dangerous about commenting on kind of how that's going to play out, but in a lot of markets, like Florida's best example, the money has chased the medical licenses, really hard, paying super high prices to have a medical dispensing license in Florida, because history says most jurisdictions, if you have a medical license, when the state decides to go recreational, you have some sort of preference or head start. Yeah, that's happened in Oregon. It's happened in Washington. Happened here in Colorado. Colorado, when they decided to legalize recreational, the first 2 years it was only through the operating medical licenses could then convert and do recreational. So they had a great head start. So that's been happening in Florida, where the 2 or 3 MSOs have been paying huge premiums to have medical licenses, because they're relatively few for the population, but betting on the come that eventually it'll transition into a recreational market. Let me talk for a couple minutes how I got into the cannabis space. So I've been doing appraisal for 25 years, and have a golf buddy that belongs to my country club, a tax client, made his money in insurance and real estate, And he called me one day and he goes, Ron, he goes, my neighbor wants me to buy into his dispensary. And if I do that, will you help keep me out of trouble? And this was 2015 and 14, I think it was 14. And I said, Rodney, I go, let me check and get back to you, because it was still relatively new here, and we had not done any cannabis work. I feel like it's in my DNA because I grew up, 10 miles from Ann Arbor in the 60s.
Yeah.
I guess I can slip this in here. I was in the retail marijuana business in my dorm in Ann Arbor in the 70s. So that's where I got my start in the business.
Yeah, a long time ago.
So I went and asked my partners. I go, my friend and client, wants us to help him kind of navigate an investment in a state legal regulated, cannabis facility. And that's important because I emphasize we only work with state legal regulated, clients. And we make it very clear that we need to verify, that they're legal, and that's just part of kind of our intake procedure, versus getting involved with anything that is gray or illicit.
Yeah.
They need accounting too, but I'm not sure they need tax help. But that's a different story. But so I asked my partners. They said, I called Mary Medley, who is the CEO of the Colorado Society of CPAs, and she said call the State Board of Accountancy. And I feel like I'm turning myself in, putting myself on the radar. Like, gee, I'm a CPA and I want to work with a cannabis client, and is that okay? Let me take down your name and your license number and get back to you. Kind of deal. But we decided to do it. He ended up investing with his neighbor, buying out his neighbor, expanding his marijuana business he had 5 dispensaries and 2 grow operations that we helped do the consulting and some modeling and that type of thing. And he built it up, and then he sold out to one of the larger brands here in Colorado. And I think his timing was excellent. But it was how I kind of cut my teeth in kind of, getting into the niche, and I was just fascinated by it. We started getting more inquiries. So my partner, Brenda Clark, got together with another colleague, Stacy Udell from New Jersey, and we decided to write a book, the Cannabis Industry Accounting and Appraisal Guide, that we spent a lot of time in 2017. It self-published it in June of 2018. And it's just been a phenomenal calling card for all of us, that people, they're trying to figure out how to value their license right, or their grow or their dispensary, or they have a dispute, and they Google around and they find their way to the book, and then they find their way to us. So,
well, and it's interesting to me, 2017 still, we had Colorado, Oregon, Washington. It was pretty still new. So I can't wait for your updated guide. I mean, just from the last 6 years, I mean, we're national now practically.
Yeah. Our book's gone from 215 pages. I just got the galley proof to do a final fatal flaw review, and it's 379 pages.
Holy moly.
And about half of that is our appendice items, including a sanitized valuation report that is probably 80 pages of that 379. But we've expanded the inventory chapter. We've expanded attestation stuff. I'm sure there's more that you and your group could look at it and say, well, gee, here's what you need for the next edition. But we tried to cover what we thought was evolving and growing. But it's been fun, and it's a lot of work. But we're really excited because we're just about ready to kind of flip the switch and get it into production. So that'll be cool.
And that'll come out in early 2023, you think?
Yeah. I'm telling people that like March 1st, I'm thinking.
Well, and yeah, definitely keep me posted, because we're gonna have a lot of requests for that. Also, I'll just go ahead and mention here, and we'll cover at the end, that we'll we'll ask for your easiest way to find you, but we'll put all this in the show notes, and how cannabis CEOs or others can find you and your firm, et cetera, via Google or your website or Instagram or wherever
Cool.
you like to be. I was gonna circle back now to, so you have always, and this ties in exactly to what we do at Dope CFO, you've been very, very involved for decades in the industry, and now in this niche or others, and you participate and you help out and you volunteer and you give back, and all things which we tell people to do. Not only is it good, and we all should be doing that, whether it's mentoring or giving time to our state society or whatever, but then also it helps build your practice as well as your knowledge. I have a concept that I call VIP, and that it's like a balloon, and we're the asset of our business, especially if we start our new business, which we have many people that are just going out on their own and they're one person firm. And I call it your VIP balloon, and it starts where you are and it just grows and it never ends till the day you're 6 feet under or retire. And that stands for valuable expertise, instruction, and participate. So I like to tell people, like in this market, I want you to immerse yourself and participate and volunteer and mentor and instruct and get on stages and build your expertise and read. Like you picked up the Wall Street Journal, you send me stuff all the time and hopefully vice versa. That's like, hey, did you see this, Andrew? Just building that knowledge. We're an asset and we build it, but why don't we cover going all the way back? You've been just actively involved at your state society and the AICPA, and there's various committees. And so why don't we go over that, even just kind of at the broad accounting level, and then maybe even at the niche level as we gone on down, and even the AICPA cannabis conference.
Certainly. And I think there's some, concepts here that for people that are trying to build their brand, can take advantage of, teaching, speaking, writing are ways to do that. And there are never enough hours in the day, but you've got to devote some chunk of your productive time to, your holistic identity and what you want it to be, where you want to be in 3 years or 5 years, and how are you going to get there. And it's building, a reputation, building confidence, teaching. I love to teach, and I've been doing that a long time. Probably my first major opportunity was at the University of Denver Law School. They have a program called a Master of Science of Legal Administration that trains court and law firm administrative personnel. And I was asked to teach a financial management class in that master's program, and did that for many years, and then migrated over to the Daniel School of Business, where I've taught valuing of business, and I do a lot of expert witness work. And the fact that I am comfortable teaching, getting up in front of a crowd, doing something like this, is it just, that FaceTime is good. And I'm gonna I probably just go off on a tangent here, because I think it's really relevant, but the best marketing tip I ever got as a professional practitioner was from a guy who was Inc. magazine's market person of the year, and this goes back like 30 years ago. I got invited to a luncheon presentation by a financial planner in Boulder here, and the guy that talked to us had this concept called shelf space of the mind. And there were probably 50 people in the room. And he said, does everybody here brush their teeth every day? And everybody's going, whoa, well, so he goes, what kind of toothpaste do you use? And it's like, well, Crest, Colgate. He goes, how many can you name? And you ask a couple of people to name, toothpaste, they could name 2 or 3. He goes, I just went to the local grocery store, and do you realize there's 40 different brands of toothpaste? But you only know 2 because that's all your mind is a crowded place, and you don't have room for all the choices in toothpaste. He said laundry detergent. You do the same thing with laundry detergent, asking some of the ladies kind of, laundry detergent, the same thing. He goes, so if you're a service provider or you're selling a product, you've got to get your product or your service up on the shelf in your customer's head. And he goes, there's two ways to do that. He said, the mind is, cluttered and it's full, and shelf space is at a premium, like a grocery store. So you either need to get them to expand the shelf space for, valuation practitioners, or you need to knock somebody else off and get your name up there. And the whole focus was, how do you knock somebody else off? Well, you send them a little article, you send them a newsletter that they don't read, but they see where it came from. You recognize them on their birthday, whatever it is. You just you don't want to be a pest or annoyance, but you keep yourself in front of them. And then when they go, oh, I have a need, what are my choices? Hey, that senior guy just sent me a little article. I'll pick up the phone and call him. That's been a key part of my strategy, and that's why I'll take this thing out of the Wall Street Journal and probably blatantly bust their copyright, but I'll scan it in and send it to you and a few others and say, I thought you might be interested. So
it's really great. And what's interesting with you saying you're almost 70 and you have a long, long career, and you get to the point, and you even told me this, that so much work comes to you, you're just turning it away left and right. And so that's kind of, I tell someone earlier in their career, you're 30 and Ron's 70. It's when we start a new business, we have to wait to find our first clients and then serve them well. But when you get to the end of your career, if you've done it right, like you have, you don't find clients. You don't need, if you never did another marketing thing the rest of your life, I'm convinced you will have as much work as you want. But it takes time to get there, to do those things and get involved and do all those things and spend that time and energy. And it's not just blasting people with emails and cold emails. Hey, I'm an accountant, I can do your AR or whatever.
Hey, teaching a master's level class is a ton of work. It's a ton of commitment, and I probably sacrificed some family things along the way. But I enjoy getting up, speaking in front of people. I enjoy writing articles, but it takes time. And I've had people go, Ron, how did you manage to write 3 books? And it's like, well, you learn what comes on after Seth, Jimmy Fallon, then Seth Meyers, and then what Carson Daly comes on after that at 1 o'clock in the morning while you're up here pounding on a keyboard trying to finish off a PowerPoint slide deck or your lesson plan for next Wednesday.
Well, and so going back to the AICPA Cannabis Conference, why don't we shift to that? So I think we're in number 4. I think you've been involved in all 4. I've been involved in the last 3. It's been super amount of fun. Again, it takes a lot of work and time and commitment. Talk a little bit about that, and we'll plug the AICPA Cannabis Conference a little bit, which is coming up in August in Boston.
I'm super excited, Andrew, because as we've watched it evolve, and we have really good staff people helping us, because I've experienced some that are adequate but not to the level. We have Anna and Mallory, and a shout out to them because they're the ones that are behind the scenes making us look good as the conference committee. But this is our 4th or 5th year, I can't recall, but I was honored because we brought it to Denver last year, and that was super cool. And we're going to be in Boston this year, which is really good. They initially wanted to do last year in Vegas in August because they had some unused hotel room commitments from COVID cancellations, and we're going, Vegas is so. Some people love it, some people hate it, but trying to go there the first week of August is like, geez, why don't we go to Death Valley? Where
it's so hot.
So I'm excited that we're bringing it to the East Coast. I remember I go back to even when Engage, which is the big mega thing that AICPA does at the MGM, where they put together real estate, banking, SEC, tax, about 5 or 6 or 7 freestanding conferences into one mega conference that all is in the same space, with the thought that people can cross-pollinate. If you're, if you're coming for banking, but you want to sit in an SEC class, they're all within the same facility. And they decided they wanted to do, this was 5 years ago, a class on cannabis. So they found me, and said, would you like to come out and speak on this? I go, yeah, sure. So, paid expenses to go to MGM in Vegas. So I'm out there. But it was kind of funny because the class was on the last day, the last session, and it was down the last hallway at the end, where it was like, we're going to do cannabis, but we don't really want to let anybody know, it's like, because the AICPA is pretty, they're risk averse.
Yeah.
And they still, see it, as you and I know from some discussions we've had with, it's still illegal at the federal level. So, but we're going, yeah, but, it's a $30 billion industry and they need accounting support. So maybe you ought to help the members that, have made the leap to work with state legal regulated, clients.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned, and it's really nice that the AICPA now is behind this a little bit as well. So that's been great to get their push, because there's still states. I have a lady in my program, won't say names, but Kansas, which is your neighbor, and the state, she's engaging with the state. She only said she has exactly 0 cannabis clients, and she said she was only considering serving cannabis, and they're sending out they're sending her letters and emails and what are you doing? And this is federally illegal. And hopefully I'm going to connect with them. I was like, hey, Kansas, you need to start addressing this. It's coming. You need to think about it. You've got accountants that are serving the niche. It's a massive industry. The last Pew Research thing that came out was 88% of Americans believe in medical cannabis. That's quite a number. But anyway, yeah, we will have a lot of fun. I'm glad we could talk about this August. We cover a lot of topics. It is a lot of fun. We do some fun events. I know there's talk of a harbor sale and baseball game or whatever. So if you're out there wanting to go to the event, we'd love to see you. I think it's August 14th and 15th. Very close to that time. So plan ahead for that. And you will be there. I'll be there. And again, you've inspired me, because I'm coming up. I've got 1 year to 60, and a lot of people are thinking about retirement, and I'm thinking, no, I want to go to 70. I'm having fun. I like doing this. This is a fun industry. I like getting involved, going back to the whole VIP instructing. I've always been involved in mentoring, but things that were totally unrelated to accounting. And now I've gotten involved in teaching and mentoring in the space. And because I get lots of accountants coming to me like, oh, I just hate just sending 100 emails on LinkedIn to CEOs and whatnot, or I hate marketing. I was like, well, if you hate marketing, just get involved in the industry. It's actually fun. You meet people, you're getting out there, and you start meeting people. And it may seem slow in year 1, but by the time you get to year 30, you look back and you're like, oh yeah, it was hard at first, but it gets fun and loads from there. Why don't we hit real quick any advice to accountants wanting to get into this industry or help pushing the movement? It is tricky. Some people are still terrified, like, I'm going to get arrested if I serve a cannabis client.
Yeah. I mean, you got to know what you're doing. So if you're working in the space, you got to make an effort to learn what's going on. So, look for, opportunities. The bar associations in states where we have legal regulated cannabis, some are kind of in the startup mode, the more recent kind of converts. But so the Colorado Bar Association has a cannabis law section that I pay to be a member of, so I can be plugged in and network with them for business development, but also kind of keeping my ear to the ground in terms of kind of what's happening. We're not to digress, but Colorado's moving towards psychedelics. 2 very prominent cannabis law attorneys that are nationally known for regulatory law, helping states form their regulations. One of them just announced that he's like retiring from the firm to pursue the psychedelic market, which I think is just kind of fascinating. Just all the other derivatives that you kind of need to be cognizant of if you're serving it. I know you have a training modules for people that are coming into your program to teach them, about 280E inventory costing and what's unique about a chart of accounts and those types of things. So you're providing an amazing service to the people that are out there trying to get it right, because as you know, a lot of especially the smaller operators, they're artisans and they're farmers that want to be in the legal pot business, and they don't know a hoot about business management or charts of accounts. So they need folks like you and me and our brothers and sisters to kind of help them stay out of trouble.
And you bring up an interesting point. And, before I got into cannabis, kind of accidentally, because I happened to be in Oregon, leaving Oklahoma, but yeah, you meet some interesting characters, and it's kind of fun with some of these. But even going back to that, I think it's the Altermed case in Colorado, and they were kind of that. They were kind of the hippie husband-wife farmers, and they got into the battle with the IRS, and they lost a ton of money, and they got divorced, and they were in court for 4 years, and it was like a horror story. And here they were just, I call them a couple of hippies, probably great people, and wanted to. And so you definitely get some interesting characters in the space. So you'll never be bored. Now, one thing I've said, I tease, so I live in Bend, Oregon, which is a big high-tech startup hub. And for the reason of, this is where the people in Silicon Valley have vacationed for decades. They've got their software company in Silicon Valley. They fly to Bend to go skiing and mountain biking. And so they started, those people, they'd start doing exits in Silicon Valley, and they'd buy homes here. And so we have the Bend Venture Conference, and I was pretty involved in this tech. And the deal was, when I'd go out to meet a tech CEO, they might be a Harvard graduate, and they'd always tell me, Andrew, I know I'm not an accountant, but I actually know more about accounting and tax than you probably know. I'm smarter than you. I went to Harvard, and my software company is the best thing ever. And oh, by the way, we're totally broke, and no one will invest in us. And I said, conversely, I'll go meet the cannabis CEO, and it looks like this kid looks like he should belong in the skateboard park, and he looks like he just got out of jail yesterday. But by the way, he's got $5 million from his uncle, and he'll gladly tell me he knows nothing about accounting and tax, and he wants my help. So I really appreciate working with some of these owners, not all of them, but definitely a good time.
Yeah, it is. It is amazing characters along the way, and some amazing success stories. You ask how do people get knowledge? I didn't make it this year, but the MJ BizCon in Las Vegas that they have every November, and I think they had over 30,000 people again this year.
It was
and the exhibit hall is, man, if you just want to see what's evolving and happening, you go look at the extraction apparatus and the security systems and the lighting and the soils, and I mean, there's every ancillary service under the sun there, and you just kind of get a good dose of kind of like what how transformative the whole industry is.
It's amazing. And yeah, just to walk I didn't walk, there's a lower level and an upper level. The lower level take you about 45 minutes to even possibly walk around. It's so big. Well, why don't we close with, where can people find you? We've talked about the upcoming book will come out. We'll definitely be posting about that as well on all of our social media. We'll put all your links in. How can cannabis CEOs or others find you and your firm? The easiest way, where are your best resources to catch you?
Yeah, thanks. Our CPA website is cpavalue.com, all one word, cpavalue.com. I grabbed that years ago, and it's been precious to have that for where I've evolved from. So I've had that website for probably 35 years, so it's kind of cool. We also have Canna Valuation, all one word, cannavaluation.com, where we have information on our cannabis services and our first edition of our book. We haven't updated it for the second edition yet. We're going to be doing that shortly. But so you can find information in those two places. And I don't mind if you put my email in the in the whatever you summarize here, ron.seigneur@cpavalue.com. First and last name separated by a period, and you can try calling me too, but it's probably best to send me an email. It's fascinating, isn't it, how the world's evolved, where a lot of the people I deal with, they don't even have time for emails anymore. It's like a text message. It's like I'm trying to slow things down instead of speed things up. So
yeah, and agree and simplify. But going back again to, I tell people every connection, every meeting counts. You never know. And again, even things out of your control, like that car accident, it's like little things that take one instant and they might lead to a life-changing event or whatever.
Absolutely.
I always talk
Absolutely.
about when I was here originally in Bend, Oregon, there was this junior. He was barely more than a teller out of Wells Fargo, and he was like 22. As I guess as junior of a banker as you could be, and he kept bugging me to go to coffee. And I kept ignoring him and over, but he wouldn't let go. And I finally went to coffee with him 6 months later. We went to coffee, we went back to the office. He said, "Hey, Andrew, you need to meet Marshall. He needs a CFO doing an exit." It led to mid six-figure client for me. And so you never know where you're going to meet those connections, whatever. And so, and which ones are going to be, sometimes you think something's going to be great and it turns out to be bad. So we just got to get up each morning and go. But this has been really awesome. It's a great topic, great industry. We've had a lot of fun. I had an absolute ball having steak dinner with you after our North Carolina event. We were at a little tiny hotel in North Carolina, but there was a steakhouse attached. And so
it was excellent. We had time to do that. I'm going to make one last plug too, if I may.
Oh yeah.
I'm doing a webinar on January 5th on emerging issues in the cannabis industry that will take a deep dive into valuation issues, and that is through Business Valuation Resources, which is based in Portland, and they serve the valuation industry. But if you go if you Google Business Valuation Resources, you'll find an education tab there, and you can find the January 5 webinar. So if anybody wanted to partake a longer presentation talking about the stuff we've talked here in the last hour, and a little deeper dive into some conceptual issues, feel free to take advantage of that.
A great point, and we'll put that on the show notes. But also, Tyson, let's get that link and we'll put it out to all of our community as well. Like right now, that's only a week away, so let's get that out, because you'll definitely get a lot more attendees.
Cool.
So we'll do that one as well. And appreciate you jumping on our podcast. We will definitely be seeing each other soon. I know we got a lot more planning committee calls, and then August in Boston. It's my only event scheduled so far in 2023.
I look forward to that. So yes, thank you.